what?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Protect Our Queens podcast presented by the Give Us a Shot Network. With me, as always, my brother in Christ, my partner in women's basketball crying, Martin Stories of Basketball Society, my guy. It's been 2 weeks, man. How you doing?
Been a couple weeks. Good to be back, man. Good to be back. Lots happening. Lots going on. Yeah, we're back in the thick of it. The year's almost over. It's holiday season. You got you a nice little breath in there before you started, sir. You sounded like you needed that.
I did need that. It's going to be fun. I mean, we're going to do a lot of stuff. There's going to be a lot of talking, and I did need that. It's been a day, so
yeah, a little in through the nose, out through the mouth. That was pretty mindful breath of you there, sir. Not too bad. Not too bad.
You know, when you've been podcasting with the Breath Man for the past year and some change, you know, you just kind of pick up some
Breath
things.
Man. What a title.
The king of breathing over here. This unlocking
King of breathing
and all that stuff.
Wow, he just keeps rattling them off. King of breathing.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm pumped for tonight. There's a lot to talk about. We've missed obviously 2 weeks, so there's a couple things that we do need to kind of recap in the What's New POQ segment. The biggest thing that's new in the world of women's basketball is the Golden State Valkyries. The WNBA has a new basketball team with a roster. And so the expansion draft was on Friday. And as you can see here on the screen, these are the list of names that have been drafted. I think probably the biggest thing to note from the expansion draft, of course, is that the Valkyries opted not to take a player from the Seattle Storm, which I thought was a little bit interesting. But yeah, man, I mean, we're getting one step closer to the 13th team joining the WNBA. First new team joined the W since 2008, I believe. So this is a long time coming, man. And this roster is an interesting one. To say the least.
Yeah. I mean, Kate Martin was probably the biggest name that was buzzing the most from the roster. Asia Wilson was not pleased, as we found out through social media, that she lost her rookie. But still a cool chance to see Kate Martin get another chance on a brand new opportunity, essentially on a team from scratch. Julie Van Loo is a sleeper for the Mystics. You got a chance to watch her a bunch this season covering the Mystics. She can really play. They've got players who can play. Zandalicini, she played a little bit with the Lynx through the playoffs. We saw a little bit of what she could do. It's kind of like a stretch big. Veronica Burton can play. We know what Kayla Thornton can do from the Liberty, right? She played big minutes for them in the playoffs and the finals. Yep. Monique Billings can play. Temi Fengbeli from the Fever, she can play. So they got some good players to work with going forward. May not be won't be the finished product, but I think that's a decent start.
For sure. I think the best thing about this roster is that these are all players that in the right package for the right team could be traded to another team, either for another player or to free up some space for the Valkyries to be a little more active in free agency. And then, of course, something that you've been very keen and like kind of mentioning in our off-camera conversations, obviously, is the fact that the Valkyries do also have the 5th pick in all 3 rounds of the WNBA draft that's coming up as well. And so that's another thing to look out for as they continue to, finalize this roster and make moves so that they're ready for their opening game against the Sparks for what I believe is their home opener to start their season. So very excited for the Valkyries to be joining the WNBA.
And I don't think it's going to take that long for them to have like a legit team with the influx of talent that's coming in, with the seemingly the big movements that are going to keep happening with potential trades. We're going to talk about Jewell Loyd in a little bit, free agency, and just the depth of talent across the league that's already there and that's coming in over the next few years. I don't think it'll take long for Golden State to at least be competitive in the league.
I mean, if you remember back to the opening press conference, I believe it was Bob Myers that said that their goal is to win a championship within the first 5 years of their existence. So from 2025 to 2030, they expect to hoist a banner. And to your point, with all the talent that's coming in, I mean, that's very likely a possibility, especially if they're going to be run, at the level that we expect them to be run, just based on some of the names that we already know are in the front office and who their head coach is and things of that nature. Again, very excited for Golden State, very excited for the future of the WNBA, very excited to see what they continue to do with moves. Speaking of new things happening, there's also Unrivaled, which we have been keeping track of over the past months of the course of the unveiling of their process. It was announced, I believe, last week or maybe over the weekend that LSU superstar Flau'jae Johnson has also signed an NIL deal with them as well, similar to what Paige Becker signed earlier on. And so just yet another amazing thing that Flau'jae Johnson is doing. I feel like now I look up and everywhere she's there, right? She's performing with Lil Wayne. She's releasing songs. She's doing music videos. She's hooping on the floor. She's all over the place, man. I love this for her. I love this for Unrivaled as well. Just another great thing on the resume of Flau'jae Johnson.
Yeah, what's interesting too with that, because people were trying to figure out what the announcement was with her, because they teased something with like her and Paige or whatever, and people thought that it might be the kind of somewhat obvious one, was like they thought that she might be joining Unrivaled, but I think we got caught up in the excitement and forgot that Flau'jae is in the middle of a college season. She's not just going to dump LSU to go play for Unrivaled in January. So when I thought about it for a little longer, this is what I predicted, and obviously makes a ton of sense. But it's still fascinating that they're bringing on ambassadors who are not in the pros. So it really speaks to the influence of these players and the fact that they're making them ambassadors while they're still in college, while they have this massive popularity right now. So I think that's a really brilliant move by Unrivaled, to have faces and ambassadors of the league that are these young players that are coming up and, assuming eventually will be in the WNBA in the next few years.
Yeah, and on that same wave, Unrivaled earlier today, I didn't include it in here, but they also announced a partnership with Under Armour as well. Under Armour will be the official brand sponsor for like the uniforms and things of that nature. So they're just continuing to just roll out all the partnerships and all the new things. Very excited for Unrivaled to begin January 17th. Martin, you did a reel on the page about this earlier today, leading up to the show tonight. Caitlin Clark was revealed as Times Athlete of the Year for 2024, and there were some interesting quotes and there's some interesting commentary from Caitlin Clark about certain things that she experienced this calendar year 2024. I know you did a little bit of digging in there. What were some of those things that stuck out to you the most?
I mean, she addressed like white privilege. She talked about Angel. She talked about the Dejanay Carrington eye poke thing. She addressed the Team USA stuff, being left off the team, which was what I reacted to and did the reel on, because she said a lot of things that seems like she just took verbatim what I had said as far as pimping her out for popularity and views. And it seems like she wasn't all that interested in that either. It's a different argument to talk about, like, if she was good enough or not. I never thought that was the argument. It had more to do with external factors and attention on her over the team. And based on her words, clearly she understood that side of it. And wasn't interested in participating just to dangle her around as their shiny new marketing ploy. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. I've been sifting just through quotes mainly that I saw on social media. I didn't get to really read through the piece, but saw a couple interesting quotes from other people. A'ja Wilson, Tammy Fagbenle, who played with Caitlin this past year in Indiana. Some really interesting stuff from there. But yeah, I think it's just a great story. It just came out today. Time just announced it today. She's the first WNBA player ever to be Times Athlete of the Year, after she's had what she described accurately as an historic year for herself and her career. And obviously she's just getting started in the WNBA. But to even see that a women's basketball player as the Athlete of the Year, like, another one on the list for Caitlin and what she's doing for the women's game. And I really do appreciate some of the stuff that she had a chance to say in that feature.
Absolutely. I mean, I emphasized the big thing for me was she's been playing basketball nonstop, it seems like, since October, November of 2023, right? So like to continue that momentum into the WNBA, to have the year that she had, well deserved. Like I don't know if there's anyone else that you could have made athlete of the year right this year when you think about just the full body of work of 2024. Much needed time off for her now, and I'm again another player that we're super excited to see and tap into when the season starts back up in May. From a player who is just getting started in the pros to a player who continues to build her legacy in college, someone we've been fortunate enough to have on the show. Hannah Hidalgo, guard at Notre Dame, has become the fastest player in program history to reach 1,000 points. Something I saw on Twitter in response to this as well is she's never had less than 10 points in her collegiate career so far. And there's only been 4 games up to this point from all of her freshman season up to the game she played down where she's even had less than 15 points per game. I don't know what else to say about Hannah that we haven't already said over and over again. This is dope, bro. This is really, really dope. Love this for Hannah.
Yeah, says a lot about the scoring tear that she's on. The scoring rate that she's going at right now is really impressive. Having covered her in high school, having watched her since middle school, she really came into more of her scoring identity, I would say, in her junior and senior year of high school. And she scored over 2,000 in high school, kept scoring more and more each year, just got more dominant. And it seems to have just carried over right into college. And at this rate, she's going to hit over 2K at Notre Dame. And as it says there, she's the fastest player in program history to reach 1K. She did it in 44 games. The person who had the record before was in 1997, Beth Morgan Cunningham, and she did it in 60 games. So we everyone's talking about Guard U and Notre Dame. We know all the great names and players that have come through there. Hannah Hidalgo, the fastest player in program history to reach 1,000 points. And I'll just say again, it's interesting because a lot of people who watch Hannah and watched her and knew about her from high school coming into college, a lot of people may not label her a scorer. Even now, most people, when you think scorer, you may not think of her, but guess what? She's averaging 25 a game. She's relentless, a true student of the game. I could give you a laundry list full of reasons as to why you should never doubt or underestimate this girl. She just loves the game. She's obviously very talented at it, but she's a workhorse. So, I mean, people love to marvel over her defense and how dominant she is on that end. Look at what she's doing offensively. She's one of the top scorers in the nation right now. And it says a lot, especially at her size and the way she's doing it so efficiently. So, yeah, really impressive. Trust me, when you've seen her progression and she's always been able to score the ball, but she came in really as like a point guard. Like I saw her as just being a great point guard right away through and through, able to score, but she's gone to another level scoring the ball. So very impressed, very proud. Hannah Hidalgo, the one and only.
I just want to say I texted this to you as soon as I saw the clip. There was a clip of an interview that Hannah did. I don't know how old the clip is, where they asked her what her favorite thing about something to the fact like what her favorite thing about playing basketball was. And she was like, I love making whoever I'm guarding uncomfortable. And the first thing I did when I saw that is I texted Martin and I said, Hannah Hidalgo is a psycho. I have never in my life heard someone say that about playing the game of basketball, bro. I have been every time I watch Hannah play, when I have the opportunity to sit down and watch Notre Dame play basketball, when I'm watching highlights, I am just awestruck at what I'm seeing. I mean, the over the head pass that she hit the other day to Olivia in that game the other day was nuts, broke the internet. Like I've never seen these things before. Like some of the things that she's doing, I've just never seen. Shout out Hannah, bro. That's all I can say. Shout out Hannah, man. She's
very different.
She's very different.
Even with that pass, it's like I said with the scoring, I think the defense gets talked about probably the most, and like her intensity and her energy, like they just keep asking her, like, Hannah, where does that energy come from? Because you see it every game. She plays the game with the utmost passion. Yeah. And some of her like really profound intangibles sometimes get lost, like the fact that she is a great passer and just her feel for the game sometimes gets lost. Sometimes you notice it in her defense with the way she can time her steals and strip the ball away from bigs and just her timing. So her feel is on display most of the time. But even with that pass, I was stuff like that is stuff that she can do too. Because that was I mean, I wish we should have had it. I should have grabbed the clip. We should have really just broken down that whole play and looked at it on here, because the timing of her when she went to the floor, she would have had to have seen Olivia take off on her way down to the floor. She didn't even have to look, but she's on her way down to get down on the floor to get the ball. She felt and saw Olivia take off, which meant that if I just get this thing right here, I don't need to turn around. I don't have time even. Let me just it'll get there. But I mean, but the placement, Marcus. I mean, my God, that's Joe Burrow. That's Aaron Rodgers. That's high level placement. I mean, right in stride, hit Olivia right perfectly in stride for that layup. Like, dude, that was. I mean, you could inject that into my veins, bro. That's one of the best basketball plays I've ever seen.
I don't even know. I don't know what I was doing when I saw the clip for the first time with my own eyes, but I know I stopped whatever I was doing and watched it like maybe 10 times because I couldn't even muster, like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing when I saw that clip. Last thing before we jump into the show from What's New POQ, the WNBA has been named the fastest growing brand of 2024. And you see some of the other brands on this list here. Some of them I have no idea what they are, but this is huge for the WNBA. It's a testament to what we've been saying over the last year and some change about how great the sport of women's basketball is. But I mean, when you saw this, Martin, like what were some of the things that were initially running through your mind when you found out that the WNBA was named the fastest growing brand of 2024?
So yeah, for context, this is from a company called Morning Consult. And they do this every year, and they track consumer behavior daily from like thousands of brands. So this is literally what they do. I don't know how long they've been doing it, but this is what they do. And the criteria is kind of right there too. They rank brands based on measuring growth. Basically, it's based on consumers who would say they would considering purchasing from a brand over the course of the year. By the way, the WNBA was not even in the top 20 on their list last year in 2023. And the number one brand last year, the fastest growing brand that they had in 2023 was ChatGPT. And trust me, if you see my browser tabs, you'll know how important ChatGPT is to some of us out here. We go together real bad. And ChatGPT is booming right now. So just to give you a sense of how accurate this list can be, ChatGPT was number one on their list last year. But yeah, I mean, we know that there was a huge influx of popularity, numbers, record attendance, record viewership in the finals and the regular season. We know a lot of that had to do with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. But we also know it was a combination of the growth that was rising and happening already before them, the combination of the two. So, I mean, even to see the WNBA ahead of certain, I mean, come on, Disney Plus. I mean, that's got to be something like that. Yeah. That seems impressive to me to be ahead of Disney. And, YouTube Shorts and Smart Water. I mean, that really says something. And again, for them to not even be in the top 20 last year, really, it just, of course, speaks to just the boom of the WNBA. Basketball is booming. It's not the NBA. It's not the WNBA. It's not just college. It's the whole sport is booming. And the WNBA and women's basketball is really like kind of at the height of it right now, I would say.
There's one more thing that we want to talk about for What's New POQ. But before we do that, let me play this clip of A'ja Wilson from a couple weeks ago.
One that we hear all the time, which is obviously just dumb, is the lowering the rim discussion. So at that point, are you even like, when you hear that, are you even giving that any...
I want that.
God. What is it going to do? Like, you guys, like, honestly, if you want it, like, what is it really it's going to do for us?
It wouldn't do that much, but...
Okay, well, then that could be, like, my off-season. I would much rather just gear my off-season to, like, okay, Berta maxing it out. Like, let's focus on this jumping. Versus lowering it, like, an inch. That could change all of our shots. Do y'all not understand that?
I mean, yeah, that's why it's never gonna
Okay.
happen. But it's
I
just
just
like
make sure, like, I
hypothetical.
would much rather just like, okay, let's get in the gym. Let's work. You never know. Next year I might dunk, Jalen. And y'all better go crazy.
Next year,
Y'all
I might
better
dunk.
go.
AJ ones.
Yeah, y'all better go crazy.
What are you saying,
That's
Josh?
because of the AJ ones.
A1s.
The A1s.
A1s.
Jalen 1As.
One A one.
1As. That's why she did it. Asia really got my back for real. She got my back for real.
Yeah, no, I'm not. No, the lowering the rim is just very childish discussion.
A very childish discussion indeed. And the other day, we got to see why it was a childish discussion, because for the third time in as many seasons, South Carolina forward Ashlyn Watkins dunked a basketball on standard regulation rims. And every time this conversation comes up, I can't help but think about when we were first starting Protect Our Queens and we were doing debunking and like reacting to like some of the most common knocks on women's basketball. And my big thing all the time is that, number one, we've seen women's basketball players dunk before. Number two, there's not that many dunks that happen over the course of a game anyway for it to make that much of a difference. But my favorite part about that clip is how silent it was when Asia was asking really basic questions. What does lowering the rim do for us? Do you realize that lowering the rim is going to affect how we play basketball? Like, do you think about that? And then the button on it, it's a childish conversation, 100%. I love how quickly Twitter pulled that clip back up and just flooded it all over the place as soon as the clip hit the internet of Ashlyn Watkins dunking the basketball. I loved it so much. Twitter is undefeated in that regard. We never forget the receipts over here on Twitter, man. It was
People doubled down, and rightfully so. That Asia moment with Jalen and Josh and them was really hilarious. Like, even for Jalen to admit, he's like, I'm one of them. Like, I want to see it too. Like, I'd love to see it. Yeah, I don't know how people miss the fact that it would. People who really advocate for that, I think they're so wrapped up in how much more entertaining it would be for them, I guess, and even for other people. Because like Jalen Brunson's the type where I'm sure he watches plenty of WNBA women's basketball. He respects the game. Even Shaq, like, as crazy as Shaq comes off, like, we know that he enjoys the product of women's basketball as is. It's not like he's saying he just can't watch it. It's not entertaining enough until they lower the rims. He makes the argument that it would just increase viewership and it would make it more entertaining to people who think that it's not entertaining. Everyone's not Ashlyn Watkins out here. Everyone can't dunk. She's a rare case. But I am glad that people doubled down, because we do have girls that already can dunk on regulation. We'll probably see some more. I don't know what it would take to increase the rate, but like, the athleticism is already evolving and growing. Toby Fournier at Duke, she can dunk. If she gets a breakaway, she will dunk the basketball. She might go off 1 foot, 2 hands. Like, she can legitimately dunk. And there are others. This girl, Dominique Malunga from France, who's coming into the WNBA, she's got a spin drop step 2 foot 2 hand dunk in her bag right now today. She's like 16 or 17 years old. Like, the girls out here can dunk, and like, they might start dunking more, but yeah, for now, the lowering the rim conversation, like, it's really, it is childish. It's just unnecessary. Like, it's just, it's asking too much of them they would have to be changing everything, and there wouldn't even be that many more dunks. Like, I see, and I feel like people see it as like it would, and this is why it's disrespectful, because I feel like people see this version of it where it's like, what's that place called? What was that thing called? Like round ball or bounce ball or something where they jump off slam ball. That's what people think they want to see in the WNBA. They want the rim to, like, the rim would have to go down to like 6 feet, Marcus. Like, they'd have to, it'd be like a kid's hoop, and that's what these people think they want to see, is women dunking on each other, drop stepping on a little kid's hoop, and they think that would increase the quality of the product. Like, come on. What are we doing?
I would love to see Asia posterize somebody, but I enjoy the one-legged stomp instead. You don't need to lower the rims to get these types of things. I'm just glad, again, that this happened like weeks after they had this conversation, and Twitter didn't forget and reminded everybody, you see, this is why we don't need the algorithms. You want to see a dunk, just watch a game. You might catch one. That is it for What's New PLQ. We're going to hit the intro and come back on the other side and jump into the Jewell Loyd trade request first.
Protect our queens.
This is what makes women's basketball so fire.
Okay, they say nobody watching. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people in there, Martin.
To see how far the game has grown has been amazing.
When recess came, like, I had my sneakers on.
I mean, I just love playing the game. It's fun.
I'm reacting on what the defender does.
I hit them with a hezzy. After that, they quit.
So we got some pretty shocking news roughly a week ago. Jewell Loyd, superstar basketball player, superstar WNBA player out of Seattle, wants out of Seattle. She requested a trade. This came just hours after the investigation into harassment allegations tied to playing time for players into Seattle Storm coaching staff last season. That investigation was closed. Hours later, Jewell Loyd wanted out of Seattle. There's a lot to unpack here. I guess before we get into like the question on the screen, which is who should trade Jewell Loyd, let's just start with simply when you found out that Jewell Loyd wanted out, what was your initial reaction? Like, what were your thoughts when you heard that?
My initial reaction is like, who is going to take a legitimate swing here and pick up one of the top scoring guards in the WNBA? I mean, this is going to be, if a trade happens wherever she goes, it's just a major move and shift in the league. And with her talent, she could go to a team and really just change everything about what their ceiling and potential could be. So to have a player of her caliber on the trade market, again, one of the top scoring guards, top scoring players in the league, like that's always a big deal. Somebody could have a major come up if they trade for Jewell Loyd.
I mean, I posted a reel on our Instagram the morning or the afternoon of the expansion draft on Friday, just kind of throwing the case out there that maybe the Golden State Valkyries should throw their name into the hat as a team that could trade for Jewell Loyd. I'll be honest, I'm not as high on that as I was a couple days ago, just simply because I personally do feel like the decision not to pick a player from Seattle is telling to me, makes me think that Golden State doesn't want to do any sort of business with Seattle. I could be wrong, right? I could be completely wrong. I could be off base there, but that's just kind of how I'm feeling. So I don't know how realistic it is. I do still like the fit. But aside from that, if there was a team or two that you think should make that swing and should go out there and go trade for a Jewell Loyd, what team do you think, or what team are you expecting to be like in the hunt for this?
So I saw Megan Hall from For the Win. She put up 5 teams that she feels could be possible trade destinations for Jewell Loyd. And I think an argument could be made for all 5. She made a nice brief argument for each team. Mm-hmm. And I like the 5 teams that she named. I think a couple of them I'm a little higher on than the others. So she put Chicago, Phoenix, Las Vegas, LA, and Golden State.
Yep.
Jewell Loyd is from right outside Chicago, so that could be a nice little homecoming situation. I would assume they'd most likely have to include Kennedy Carter and probably even their number 3 pick to land Jewell Loyd. So that would be interesting. We know that they really do need a little more of more guard presence there in Chicago. So Jewell Loyd could be a great addition to that. It's just a matter of what they're thinking in terms of Kennedy and in terms of that draft pick, which we've talked about. Phoenix could be interesting. She could really replace kind of Diana Taurasi on her way out. Whether she's retiring this year or not, we don't know, but we know she's on one of the last legs. So I think getting her in there with Kalia Copper would be a nice replacement for Diana. Vegas, I think if they're moving off of Kelsey Plum, if they wanted to make an adjustment and maybe rewire the roster a bit, essentially replacing like Kelsey Plum with Jewell Loyd, however that might work. I think that could be interesting. I think people would eat that up, especially with the All-Star video meme that we got from Jewell Loyd and Asia Wilson. I think people would be really pleased to see Jewell Loyd and Asia Wilson as teammates, so they could double back on that hilarious video. LA at Golden State, you had mentioned. I'm not as high on it, mainly because I don't know if they're going to have the pieces. I think they'd have to include their first round pick for sure. Looking at the roster they have now, I don't know if they're going to have as much leverage as some of these other teams to offer a good deal to Seattle. They just don't seem to really have the assets right now, but we could see, because they're still, I mean, they've got cap space. They could maybe work out something to maybe like swing for Jewell Loyd. I think that would make sense. And LA, same thing, where we know they need a guard presence, but we'll see. I think they might have to consider dealing their draft pick too. But I think the two main teams I think of are Chicago and Vegas. I think Phoenix would make sense too. I think I would say them as like the third team, but I think Chicago and Vegas would make the most sense to me.
It's interesting because I, as a fan of the Aces, would love to see Jewell Loyd in Vegas with Asia Wilson. I'd absolutely love to see it. I don't know though if the Aces have players that could be placed in an enticing enough trade package to send to Seattle compared to some of these other teams, right? Chicago, for example, you mentioned the Kennedy Carter aspect of it, right? Kennedy Carter had a great season last season, but it's not just Kennedy Carter. It's also the looming idea of what I would imagine to be a non-negotiable is also the third pick in this year's draft, which means a super talented young player coming to Seattle as well, right? Take a look at LA, same thing. They'll probably ask for a guard, whether that's Zaya Cook, whether that's Lexi Brown, whether that like whoever that may be, in conjunction with the second overall pick, another very talented young player entering Seattle. Even though Vegas, like that to me is a lopsided trade, which is why if Vegas were to call, and I think they should, I don't know if Seattle would say yes, because compared to what the other packages could be, I don't think it'd be enough. Even for a team, compared to a team like Golden State, who is obviously the roster, as we looked at the top of the show, not that great right now. I think there's still more that could be a little bit more enticing for Golden State to put together compared to the Aces. I'd love to see it happen. I just don't think it will. I think the best situation for Jewell Loyd to be traded into, if we're talking about looking to remain competitive and potentially make a run, would be Chicago, because I think she's a perfect fit for Chicago. You mentioned that she does, like Chicago needs a guard. They have the front court together. Like that's a team that could use, I think Angel Reese would play well off of Jewell Loyd for sure. I think she'd benefit greatly. We've been seeing her put time in a little bit here and there over the course of the offseason. You and I have talked in ad nauseum, it seemed like, over the course of the season about how there are certain types of players that fit with other types of players. I think Jewell Loyd and Angel Reese fit very well together. Maybe not as good as a Caitlin and an Angel Reese or a Chelsea Gray and an Angel Reese or what have you, but the scoring ability and the gravity of Jewell Loyd combined with a player in Angel Reese who will be better next season, I think that means a playoff appearance and maybe a surprise run in the playoffs for Chicago. So I like that. I'm still going to push for Golden State. It's a fresh slate. And you and I have talked about Golden State needing a face of the franchise. There's no better face of the franchise than one of the best scorers in the league, a multi-time champion. She was just the scoring champion in 2023, and she's a multi-time WNBA All-Star. Like, she has the facial recognition of, you know, incumbent fans who have been here for a while, as well as fans who may have casually tapped in here or there because she's a walking highlight reel. And if you just scroll through WNBA highlights, you know, every couple of highlights, you'll see Jewell Loyd. Like, there's the recognition there as well. Plus, she's playing in Seattle right now. The distance from Seattle to Golden State, not that far. And so there's that familiarity with it as well. Again, I just don't know, to your point, if Golden State can put together a strong enough package where Seattle will look at it and say yes, compared to a Chicago. I really, really, really think in this new era of Chicago Sky basketball, if they're serious about being competitive, if they're going to commit to the baloney that they put on that statement after firing Teresa Weatherspoon about wanting to prioritize winning a championship, if they're serious about that, then the Chicago Sky should do whatever it takes to trade for Jewell Loyd. And I think they will.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like trying to think if I would rather have Jewell Loyd, because I agree about, I mean, they need a scoring guard, and they kind of have one in Kennedy Carter.
Yeah.
They had one in Marina Mabry, who they traded away to Connecticut. They need scoring guards. They need scoring and playmaking guards for sure.
Yeah.
Personally, I would, and not to say, I mean, maybe it is. I think Chicago's in a tough spot with this, because we talked about with their number 3 pick, and I made the case how they desperately need Olivia Miles to fall and for LA not to pick her at 2, assuming that she declares for the draft this upcoming year. Chicago desperately needs a point guard like Olivia Miles. I don't think they need a scoring guard like a Jewell Loyd as bad as they need a point guard like Olivia Miles. So I think I don't know if I would just go ahead, and I think that pick would have to go to get Jewell Loyd. And would it be worth it? It'd be an upgrade? Yes, and it's a gamble, because again, there's no guarantee that Olivia comes to you at 3. So right. I think it's a tough spot to try to figure out, like, do we swing for Jewell now, use that pick as an asset, or do we hope to God that we can get Olivia? And if it's not Olivia, it's still going to be another really good player. But
sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling with that, because I do like Jewell there. My thing is, and I hear you, like, on what's realistic versus, like, her best chance at going somewhere for a run to compete is Vegas. Like, if Vegas were if Vegas wanted to retool their roster and get Jewell Loyd in there and flip around kind of their look in their guard rotation a little bit, that would be the most ideal setting. And I want to see Jewell go somewhere. I think Chicago would be good. Not to say I just want to see her go to Vegas, but I do want to see her go somewhere with other good players. So I wouldn't even want her to go to Golden State. Like, it would feel like 2 years ago where she was just putting up numbers, empty numbers on a squad that's losing. Like, if she's getting traded from a team where she spent her whole career, 10 years, 6-time All-Star, multiple time, if I'm not mistaken, first time All WNBA, one of the top scoring guards in the league, she deserves to go somewhere where she can compete with other high-level players right away. Chicago might make the most sense. I'm struggling with that number, with that number 3 pick. Would that be worth it? Would that be the move? I think that's interesting to think about.
I agree, but I would say, because Olivia Miles is not a guarantee at 3 for Chicago, because it's heavily dependent upon whether or not LA takes Kiki or not, based on what we talked about the last time we had a show and we kind of unpacked all of that. I think that would be the incentive for Chicago to trade for Jewell Loyd. You know what I mean? Because you and I both agree Chicago needs Olivia Miles. But the biggest thing standing in the way of that is the fact that they have the 3rd pick instead of the 2nd pick. And you and I both agree and both believe, especially given who their new head coach is, given the way that Olivia Miles has played, me, just as a cherry on top, given how Olivia Miles played in that game against USC with Cam Brink courtside, so she got to see it for herself. Like, I just don't see a scenario now at this point where Olivia Miles is on the board at 3. And maybe Chicago agrees. And maybe it's a scenario where Chicago trades that 3rd pick to go get Jewell Loyd. And then maybe they try to cook something else up to trade back up into the 1st round, maybe later on, or get another 2nd round pick so they can go find some of these, one of these other guards to bring in alongside Jewell. I just, the Vegas point, of course, again, like, it's compelling to me. I just have genuine concerns about who on this team are you going to say, like, who can you really put together in a trade package if you're Vegas that will be enticing enough to compete with potentially the 3rd pick and a good player, or the 2nd overall pick in this year's draft and a good player? Because essentially what that is, let's say, Kiki Iriafen and Kennedy Carter, or Olivia Miles and some other LA guard, is essentially what Vegas would be competing with. I don't know if we have that on the roster. I think if Kate Martin was on the roster, I think that might help, because I think there are, I think there's reason to think that Kate Martin in a good situation with the right pieces around her could be valuable on a basketball team. Clearly, Golden State feels the same way as well. But like, if you look up and down this roster, we're talking about, Alicia Clark is still there, and you're talking about Megan Gustafson and all these players. Like, when you look at what Seattle needs, Seattle's going to want to fill this hole at guard that there would be.
It would start with Kelsey Plum is the obvious centerpiece, would be the obvious centerpiece of that move. So it would come down to if they're interested in Kelsey Plum, because she's the best. It would center around her.
It would, but it would also, that's the other part of it too, is because Kelsey Plum is an unrestricted free agent, she'd have to want to go to Seattle, because Vegas would have to core her to send her there. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's why I'm saying it's I think a lot of WNBA fans, aces or not, would love to see Asia and Jewell on the same team together, just for the spectacle of it all, right? But logistically for Vegas, I just think they're in a really tough spot. With that being said, though, Becky Hammon, once we got knocked out of the playoffs, Becky Hammon did say that this roster, that the team that we saw walk off the court after that loss to Liberty, is not the same team that's going to walk onto the court for game one of the new season. And so maybe there is a commitment there, and maybe Kelsey wants to go to Seattle, and maybe that works. If Kelsey is okay with going to Seattle, then I think it's perfect. And I think that is the trade that gets Jewell Loyd to Vegas. But if Kelsey Plum's not involved, to your point, you're right. I don't know if Jewell Loyd's going to be a Las Vegas ace next season.
Kennedy Carter's a restricted free agent as well, and I'm pretty sure a Chicago deal. I know the number 3 pick would have to be included, but I'm assuming Kennedy. I don't think they'd be able to keep Kennedy Carter and come up with Jewell Loyd. I'm pretty sure she'd have to be part of that deal too, but she'd have to want to go to Seattle. So it's going to be interesting, like who takes a swing for her. I still think maybe Phoenix could be on the board, but you're right. Like, I think those draft picks are the best assets right now out there, unless you have like a good combination of like 1 or 2 good rotation players to star level players, or even future stars that you could package. Unless you have like an ideal scenario like that, if you're one of these teams, those draft picks are the best possible assets. So I think those are the teams with those high draft picks to look at for possibly trading for Jewell Loyd. I was even thinking, I was kind of toying in my head about a possibility, like if LA were to take a gamble on this, because there are still mock drafts out there. It's not definitive that Olivia goes to LA. I mean, we'll see as we get closer. But there are still mocks with them taking Kiki Iriafen at 2. So there are people who still think that they could go big with a Kiki, Cam, reunite Kiki and Cam Brink, and they go with that look and bolster their front court even more. If that's what they're thinking, what if they looked to make a trade, maybe even trade the pick, trade a couple of their guards? Dare I say, I hate to say it, because I'm sure they're not thinking this, but if you're loaded up like that, maybe you include Rakia Jackson. Like, maybe you put together, like, because I don't know how great their guard assets are. Like, they're one of their better player assets. I know she's only going into her 2nd year, but I'm just like, if you're confident in that number 2 pick, if you're going a certain way, if you're not thinking you're going with a guard, I'm just playing with it in my head, because like a team like LA, who they have great assets, we know they're young and they're going to get another good young player. Sometimes if you want to like get you a really good veteran player to go with your young players, and when you're like stockpiling all these good young players, sometimes they become good trade assets. Not saying I would do it, not advocating. I'm just
I got you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through possibilities.
I would say if the 2nd pick's off the table because they're going all in on Kiki, then the trade asset, first of all, the most valuable trade asset they have, no matter what they do with the 2nd pick, is De'Ara Hamby. No, I'm like, if the pick's off the table, but players on the roster, it's De'Ara Hamby. Her value is not going to be any higher than what it is right now. And so if they're locked and loaded on, we're taking Kiki at 2, then to me, it would make more sense for them to trade De'Ara than to trade Rakia, because I do think that they would want to. They should.
It would make sense, but I wouldn't
youth.
say she's their best trade asset because Rakia is
Okay.
younger.
Yeah.
On
You're
year
right.
2. Like, I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, like it would make more sense. But that's why I brought up Rakia, because she's their best trade asset, in my opinion.
Sure.
Her and or Cameron.
Yeah.
Those are, De'Erica has high stock right now, of course, but yeah, that's it. I mean, that's interesting. But that number 2 pick is those top 3 picks. Those are the best assets out right now.
That's a great point. I mean, it's it's interesting that it seems like the entire women's basketball world right now is kind of, hanging by a thread and kind of responding by what LA is going to do. Chicago doesn't know what they're going to do with the 3rd pick, except for with LA. And it seems as though what LA decides to do with the 2nd pick could determine the fate of Jewell Loyd and where she ends up playing basketball next season. A lot of power in LA right now. LA being the center of the women's basketball world, at least in the WNBA, seems to be when things are going well.
A lot of implications. Yeah.
Let's switch gears now. Let's toss it to a clip of Martin from a couple weeks ago. We're going to come back and talk more about some college hoops.
The way this group is set up now, again, I think Malaysia's going to keep doing what she does. No complaints, coming off the bench, less minutes, whatever it is. But when she comes in, she's going to kick up and she's going to bail them out in moments when they're going to need it. And I think this is the year post Camilla, without that unfair advantage inside, where they're going to have games where they will need her to go off. Like they will need some 30 balls from Malaysia this year. I think their defense is still really good. I mean, they're still a Dawn Staley coach team. So it's not like, they're going to be in shootouts with people, but I just think in those big moments we are going to find out in those moments all the way through the tournament. I think we're going to really see moments where it's like, okay, like they've got to let Malaysia take over, and it might just happen naturally, or they may need to let it happen. Like I said, in order for them to, especially if they're talking about repeating. All right. Let's talk about it. Who's the best team in the country? Uh-oh. You there, Marcus? Dwayne Marcus? Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Blink twice if you Wait, how are you you can't hear me.
I fixed it. Okay. I could hear you, then I couldn't. The video was like playing again on my screen. My bad. Technical difficulties. Who's the best team in the country? Before we do that, though, there's a lot of comments that came in that last segment. So just want to shout out everybody that's in there real quick. Just kind of scrolling through. Looks like Mike Hughes, our guy Mike Hughes, had just asked if Vegas wanted to trade for Jewell. Don't you think they would have kept Kate Martin as a trade piece? That's a very interesting component there. He also followed that up just by saying, hear him out, 3-team deal, Plum to Chicago, Jewell to Vegas, and number 3 pick and Kennedy Carter to Seattle.
Ooh.
That might be interesting. That might be the one that gets it done. That might be the one.
That sounds interesting.
That might be the one that gets it done, actually. That might just be the one that gets
and
it
again, the idea of if it would even something like that, like it would come down to like Vegas basically deciding that we want to essentially replace Kelsey Plum with Jewell Loyd. We're interested in doing that, and we think that would upgrade our roster, which would be very interesting. I don't think it's a necessary move. I don't think it's that clear cut. I don't know, but it would be interesting. It would be a change.
It would be a change. It would be interesting. Germ of the network, shout out Germ, also just dropped his 3 teams. Indiana, throwing Indiana into the mix. That would be interesting. Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark were the best backcourt in basketball post All-Star break. Kelsey Mitchell is a free agent. I don't know if she's unrestricted or restricted on top of my head, but a similar conversation there of, if Kelsey Mitchell is not here anymore, do we replace her with a Jewell Loyd? I think between the Stephanie White move and a potential trade offering or even landing of Jewell Loyd obviously shows that they are fully all in on winning a championship very early on in the Caitlin Clark era of Fever basketball. So that's an interesting one. Those are some, those are some interesting things to think about. I didn't even consider Indiana. But I mean, dude, they're looking. That would be interesting. That would be a really, really interesting dynamic there. So let's talk about it, Martin. Let's talk about who the best team in the country is right now. Entering the season, I think a lot of people, maybe not expected them to run the table, but a lot of people expected probably South Carolina to continue the dominance that they've shown over the past couple of seasons, and be right back in the thick of things as it relates to winning a championship and doing all that good stuff. They dropped a game to UCLA, and they've since responded well from that. But it seems like, just to kind of use your words to preface this, it doesn't seem like we have one or two teams pulling away from the rest of the group. It seems like we just have a lot of really great, sound, solid rosters in the country right now. And for the first time in a long time, I think whoever wins the national championship is a toss-up. So if you had to pick right now, if you had to name the best team in the country, who is Martin Sories' best team in the nation as of today?
It's still South Carolina to me, because they're still the deepest team by far. I don't think any team can really match their depth. I think UCLA rightfully made their argument as being right there with them. I have said that when I watch South Carolina, they just don't look as intimidating. They don't look as unbeatable. They have lost the just unfair advantage component of not having 6'7" inside with no Camilla in there. But as I've watched them, even since the bounce back from the loss to UCLA, they are figuring out their little front court roulette situation with Joyce Edwards, Ashlyn Watkins, Chloe Kitts, and Sanaya Fagan. And they had front court depth before alongside Camilla, which just made it even more unfair. Without Camilla, you see them figuring it out. They have different looks. Ashlyn is different from Joyce, is different from Chloe, is different from Sanaya, but they all contribute. And even their guard rotation, they're still even, continuing to figure out and even bolster more. Their top tier freshman, Maddie McDaniel, who a lot of people may forget that this was one of the top guards coming out in this recruiting class. She seems to just be getting better and better, finding her spots. So she's working her way in with Raven and Pow Pow and Malaysia and Tessa and Bria. So it's feeling like, again, they're getting right back to the point where they're going to be legitimately 10 to 12 deep with good players at all positions that can contribute, make a big play, make a big shot at any time. I think they're figuring out the front court situation. So UCLA is looking really impressive to me, not just because they beat them. Like we had kind of talked about them and predicted that would be their biggest challenge. And we both think highly of UCLA. They have the size. I love their size in the front court and their guard size with Kiki Rice and the Oregon State transfer to Mia Gardner, the stretch four. That was a huge pickup for them this season. And they picked up Janiyah Barker. Like, UCLA is a complete roster. They're, to me, pound for pound, they really are. And again, we saw it because they beat them. We like, you see it in how they played them. But I think it's evident now UCLA is pound for pound, like the next best right there with South Carolina, if not just as good as them. But I'm still going to say South Carolina is the best team in the country, mainly because of their depth.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of how like my thought process and all this has developed, because obviously entering the season, not just as a fan, but just because the proof is in the pudding, undefeated national champions, South Carolina is the best team in the country. They dropped the game to UCLA on the same day that Notre Dame went into USC and handled business. And after that, I was conflicted. It could have been a toss-up to me between whether or not Notre Dame or UCLA was the best team in the country. Notre Dame has since come back up, but they did drop a couple games there between that win against USC and where they're at now. UCLA has seemed to be pretty much even keel, if not getting a little bit better. So if you had to ask me right now, I would say that UCLA is the best team in the country, and they've earned it. Obviously, they're the number one ranked team in the country right now in the poll. For a lot of the reasons that I shared with you the night that we had crappy audio, like a lot of it has to do with Lauren Betts. This is the best year of basketball we've seen Lauren Betts play so far in a UCLA jersey. She's averaging 20 and 10. She's playing efficient basketball. Kiki Rice is back, and she's also playing efficient basketball. And to your point, this is a very well-rounded roster. This roster doesn't necessarily have a lot of names that will pop off of the off the box or off the stat sheet at you the way that a South Carolina or a USC or a Notre Dame or a UConn might. But these are all really good basketball players who play well together. And from the size component of it, the reason why I think even more they're the best team in the country is because their roster construction puts them in a position where there's not a team that they could match up against where they wouldn't be able to match up evenly against them or have the edge. We saw it against South Carolina. I think if they'll play USC twice later on towards the end of the season, and I think that they would do just fine against USC. I think they do fine against Texas or against Maryland or against some of these other teams. The one team where they would match up against, where I'd maybe have a little bit of concern, is Notre Dame, but that's more so just because Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo, they're the best backcourt in the country. They're just playing on a different level right now. They're the most dynamic, like they're fast. I don't think there's a team in the country that has guards that can keep up with the pace that Hannah and Liv play at, which is why I think that would be concerning for UCLA. But aside from that, overall, like if I just need one great game from one team to win a championship right now, I would pick UCLA because I think they're the most complete. I think they're the best. To your South Carolina point about the depth, my one concern there with the depth is, and we've seen it a little bit from time to time, it usually doesn't affect us when it really matters most, like when we're in the tournament and making the run for the championship. But sometimes we have seen certain players disappear when we don't need them to disappear. And we've had to rely on unexpected, unsung heroes to get us to where we want to be. Tessa Johnson is a great example of that last season. We didn't hear much from Tessa Johnson at all throughout the course of the regular season. We get close to the championship, and Tessa Johnson dropping 20-point games left and right? Ashlyn Watkins, same thing. Great player for all intents and purposes. A very quiet regular season, but then she's swatting shots left and right against NC State. Same thing against Oregon State because of the size was an issue going up against Reagan Beers. So, like, UCLA has that. They have the size. They have the roster construction, and they have just really good players at all the important positions. And they've been pretty quiet right now, but I do think that Barker and Gardner, these are two players that came in from transfers and they were great where they were at. And I think in moments they're going to be great for UCLA. I would say UCLA is the best team in the country right now.
I think that's valid for all the reasons like I had said. Like I think it's a valid argument to say they're right there with South Carolina. I think Lauren Betts is a huge part of that. Their front court is a huge part of that. They've got good guards. They've got a couple good wings. I think they're right there. I think when you watch that game that they had against South Carolina I think they have the roster. I think they seriously have a case. And it's interesting, like TCU beats Notre Dame, one of those losses that Notre Dame took. And then, South Carolina bounces back from their loss and makes TCU look like not a top 10 team in the country. They don't belong. So I still think South Carolina has that ability to, with their depth, of course, they're like, it's like I said in the clip, their defense is going to be formidable. And I think they're getting back to that, especially since the UCLA loss. Because they can be quick, they can be dynamic, they can be those things too. They can play with pace. They can keep up with you. They can bully you. They can out rebound you. They can outwork you. They still have all of those components. But I agree with what you said before. I think it's more up in the air than it was last year. But I think you look around, there's a lot of great teams. A dark horse for me is LSU. The more I watch Flau'jae and Michaela Williams out there, I think when we talk, they're clearly one of the top duos, but as a wing duo, like just seeing one on one wing and the other on the other wing just looks like one of the scariest things that you could have to deal with. And I think teams are going to have a really tough time because Michaela Williams is coming into her own now as a primary shot maker and one of their go-to players now. She's just getting more shots, more reps. and she's hard to stop from scoring the ball. I'm still seeing not great. Like, I don't really, I people talk to me. I'm having these conversations about Kim Mulkey and stuff. And I mean, I still just don't see a great offense. I talked about it a lot last year at length with Haley Van Lith, and I watched them, and I still see just a lot of one-on-one, but it works for this team and this group, I think, because of what Flaugier can do one-on-one and what Michaela can do one-on-one. They've got a couple good transfers in. You still got Anissa Morrow down there. When I watch them, they look really talented and really hard to deal with. When you have two players like that on the wings who can get after it, that's going to be a tough out. So I think LSU is kind of my dark horse to keep an eye on. UConn looks really good. They just lost AZ Fudd again. She's down again with a knee injury. She's going to be out for she's like day to day now, they said. So I just don't see UConn being at full strength without AZ Fudd in there. They're still looking pretty good. Otherwise, they're doing some nice things, but I think UConn, USC has some things to figure out. I think you're right bringing up Notre Dame, but just like pound for pound, like I think they need Maddie Westbeld back to really look like their best selves. Sure. And I think they still have questions in their front court. So pound for pound, I think we are looking at like South Carolina, UCLA. That would be a heck of a national title game if we could get that as the last game of the season. I mean, they seem to be looking like the two best teams right now.
Yeah. I mean, and for what it's worth, or we're just to throw another tough out there, I think Maryland would also be another tough out in the tournament against any of these teams. They've looked great to start the season as well. I anticipate that they'll be in the hunt for a Big Ten championship appearance as well this season. Obviously they'll have to, knock off UCLA and or USC on the road to get there. But Maryland has looked great as well. I don't, maybe not make as deep of the run as some of the other teams that you name, but just the team that I look up, and every other day I look up and I'm on Instagram, it's like they've got 3 or 4 of their starters are in double digits, and Cheyenne Sellers having a great game, or Bree McDaniel's having a great game, or whatever the case may be. They've got a really nice thing going on up there in Maryland. That's another team I think that we might need to look out for. Maybe not as one of the best team, as the best team in the country, but certainly one of those teams that if they get hot at the right time could be a tough out when it comes time to talk about when it comes time to play in the tournament. One more thing before we go. There is one player in particular that was on your mind, Martin, and that is one Madison Booker out of Texas. So let's talk about it. What's on your mind, brother?
So yeah, I wanted to I was just thinking about this watching the Notre Dame Texas game. And I think I guess it just really hit me that controversy sells, and scandal and conflict and controversy is really what sells. And it's fitting that we brought up Caitlin at the top of the show in What's New and her being named the Time Athlete of the Year. Because I was going to mention it then as kind of a foreshadow for this, because, the incident during the national championship last year between, not even incident, just the waving, the you can't see me thing between Caitlin and Angel, was such a catalytic moment for both of them. They were both already stars, and people already knew about them and were excited about them throughout the season. But when that moment happened, both of their brands and both of their names just really catapulted, because everyone was talking about them for all different reasons. It became an us versus them, picking sides, a lot of hate and vitriol and nastiness and stuff that came with it too. But there was also a lot of positivity and people becoming more aware of the two of them as basketball players, and that obviously translated into them going into the WNBA. But it's why the two of them will be forever linked, and it's a moment that we're always going to have to point back to. That was like a truly like big boom for both of them. They were already stars, they were already popular, but that took both of their names to another level, both of them, Caitlin and Angel. And when I just think about how much talent, it's like I'm constantly, it feels like I'm begging people to hear me when I say and try to explain how much talent there is in the women's game right now, from fourth grade to middle school to high school to trust me, I'm seeing it. I could spend a whole hour just showing you clips and videos and stuff people send me. I every week I'm seeing new stuff. In the college game specifically, it's why I've been emphasizing this so much. Like, if you were somebody who just got introduced to women's college basketball and is just starting to and is just becoming a fan because of Caitlin or Angel or all the stuff, that's all the momentum over the last year or so. If you love Caitlin so much, if you love Angel so much, whoever it is, whatever it is, if you're new, there is so much more for you to enjoy. And it's not to say that there are players better than them, or it's not that. It's just that if you love them, if you like that, guess what? There's even more. there's so much more for you to enjoy. My camera just went out, so that's great. So I was just thinking about it, watching Maddie Booker against Notre Dame, and Ryan and Rebecca are on the broadcast talking about how great she is and how if she were to declare for the draft, she would be a top 3 pick in April easily. Just watching her, you see how pro ready she is. It doesn't take long. Just put on a Texas game, watch Madison Booker for a few minutes, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Like, it's a legitimate case. She is completely unique. Now, she may not be shooting from half court or dunking on people or doing things that like blows your mind, but if you appreciate high level basketball and you're being introduced to talented girls in the women's game that you never knew about before, you should watch Madison Booker and your mind should be blown. You should want to know more about her. And the fact of the matter is, we don't hear Madison Booker's name as much as we hear Paige's name, Juju's name, Flaugier, Hannah, and some of that has to do with those programs that those players are at. Texas hasn't been like a big time talent program where a lot of names have come out of. So that's kind of part of it. But we're at the point now where, I mean, Texas is a top 5 team in the country right now, largely because of her. But I just think Madison Booker is a great example of someone who is so unique. We are going to miss the mark if more people, and she's got a long runway. She's only a sophomore. More people are going to know about her and hear about her over the next few years. She is going to be a top draft pick when she gets to the WNBA. Her as a player and a specimen is going to become more of a thing as time goes on. I'm sure of it, but I just couldn't help but think if Madison Booker swung on Hannah in that game, or if she got into it with Neil Ivey on the sideline, or if she started talking trash and doing something to some, automatically more people would start to know about her and hear about her. And it's not a knock or anything to like Caitlin and Angel and their whole moment or whatever. That was just Angel doing what she had done all season, talking trash. She was doing TikTok dances during games. Like, her games in LSU were a spectacle. She was dancing, doing that. Her personality was all the way out. And that was consistent with what she did in the national championship with kind of taunting Angel or whatever you want to call it. Not even Caitlin called it taunting, but that was consistent with who Angel was. And it became all this backlash happened because people are like, well, why is she doing that to Caitlin Clark? Everyone's so excited about Caitlin Clark. It's like, oh, and then all the stuff came out, calling Angel a thug and calling her this and that. And even though a lot of that was negative, it made her more popular. It made Caitlin and the support for Caitlin more popular. The people who loved and supported Caitlin doubled and tripled and quadrupled down because they're like, hey, you're not going to come at our girl. The people who love Angel are like, hey, you're not going to come. So it just became, their popularity bolstered because of that controversy. So I'm just like, it's an unfortunate truth. It's true in our world, in our society. Controversy sells, scandal sells, and it markets and it promotes and it bolsters because that's just the world we live in. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. And I'm just like, man, Maddie Booker's talent is going to speak for itself. Just like Hannah's does. It's not like Hannah's getting into scandals and stuff and she's becoming a more popular player. But I'm talking about like that next level. Where we saw how it got after that national championship game, where it seems like everyone is talking about them on news shows and politics shows. I mean, that thing was everywhere. It transcended just basketball and sports It went into culture and society. And of course, the race stuff and everything, all the things that played into that made it the perfect storm. So it's not to say if Maddie Booker were to just swing on Neil Ivy or Hannah or something in that game, it would automatically have that same effect, but it would create more conversation about her as a player, and it would make her more popular. I get that. It's just an unfortunate truth, but I'm just like, man, it sucks that it's going to take more time for Madison Booker to get more popular, because she's not going to have some crazy controversial catalytic moment. And a lot of these girls won't. Most of these stars won't. That was a unique moment in time in sports history. But it's just something I continually acknowledge, because you can't you can't say that wasn't a big part in making Caitlin more popular, making Angel more popular, and making women's basketball and women's college basketball more popular, because people chose sides. And everyone was talking about it. It became a nationwide conversation. Basketball-wise, Madison Booker needs to become a nationwide conversation. And she will eventually, because she's that special.
Yeah, I mean, I echo all the same sentiments. I'll say, too, just while I was sitting there thinking, I mean, Madison being a sophomore, there are other great sophomores in the country that we're going to see her go head up with eventually before it's all said and done. We've already seen it once with Hannah. They'll probably do it again, maybe on a bigger stage in the tournament as early as this season, right? We love talking about Malaysia Fulwiley. I know that not a lot of people have been talking about Audi Crook so far at Iowa State this season, but she's been doing well as well. Like, to your point, there's so much great talent across the country. But you're right. It is unfortunate that sometimes you think about these players and like they have to get into an altercation of sorts in order for people to really start talking about them. But I think also, too, just with as good as she is and as good as Texas has been this season, that one great game against one of those teams that we mentioned earlier in the tournament, win or lose, whether it's South Carolina, whether it's UCLA, whether it's, because I'm thinking about the Haley Van Lith arc, right? Haley Van Lith was a really good player at Louisville, but the thing that really kind of shot up her stock was how great she played in the tournament in what I believe was the Elite Eight game versus Iowa in that 2023 tournament. That's really what got a lot more people talking about Haley Van Lith. And so all that we can hope is that when the lights are bright, and we know that she can do it because she's a special basketball player, the things that she's able to do on the court, like not many can do. So a very special game against another box office attraction is all it could take for Maddie Booker to start being talked about the way that she, like you and I both know she deserves to be talked about, because we've seen it happen a couple years ago with Haley Van Lith in her final season at Louisville. So but you're right. It's a great point that you make. That's unfortunate that it feels like controversy sells. That's the case, like for everything. And we can get into a whole separate thing about that and all the flaws there, but there's a lot of talent. Maddie Booker's one of them. I love Maddie Booker. I've loved what I've seen from her with the bit that I have been able to, see from her over the course of the season so far. I think she's going to have one of those games where she plays a really great game against a really good team, and either Texas walks out of here with an upset or it's a hard-fought loss, and people start giving Maddie the respect that she deserves, because she truly does deserve a lot more. She deserves to be a household name, the same way that we talk about Juju and Hannah and Malaysia and some of these other players. Maddie Booker's talent deserves to have her name be considered a household name. And if you don't believe us, just type in Maddie Booker on YouTube and watch her most recent highlight tape, and then come back and we'll tell you that we told you so. So I don't know. I love Maddie though. Maddie's great. Absolutely. I love Madison Booker.
No, just eye test wise, you're going to see just a specimen at her size, her length, the way she handles the ball, the way she shoots the ball off the dribble. And she's only going to get better. But I agree with you that this is going to be a big postseason for her, as far as having some big matchups and some big performances to let even more people know who she is and how good she is. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned that class. We should know that already. Last year's freshman class was it was a high level class. There's a lot more coming. Like Caitlin's freshman class was, her and Paige were both in the same class. Like the cycle's gonna keep coming. Like, believe me, like it's nuts. So yeah, the sophomores were the freshman class last year. And if you remember, the freshman class last year was insane. So just think of it that way. Like those same freshmen are now sophomores. They're going to be juniors next year, only going to get better. Like, so, but yeah, Madison Booker, agreed. She should be a household name, if not more so. Like she might be the most unique, like, talent specimen out of all of them. Juju, Paige, Flaugier, Hannah, and she may be the most unique to look at just from an eye test perspective, and what she brings to the table. I'm telling you, she's different. The kind of shots she can hit, the kind of things she can do, different. Speaking of Texas, she almost looks like a KD. She almost looks like a female KD out there.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
That's why she wears the number. That's so she was certainly studying tape out there, and we're seeing the proof in the pudding there. It's always a pleasure to talk women's basketball with my guy Martin Sories, and it's even more a pleasure to do it on Tuesday nights live with each and every one of you that are tuning in. Next week we will be right back here Tuesday, December 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that will be the final episode of Protect Our Queens for 2024. It has been a great 2024. We'll save all that stuff for then. For tonight, make sure that you're liking and subscribing and commenting. For all of you guys that watch live, we appreciate you. For all of you guys that are going to watch on the playback, we appreciate you. For all of you guys that follow us on Instagram and Twitter, we appreciate you. For all of you guys that are going to follow us on Instagram or Twitter as a result of any piece of content that you have seen or watching this episode, we appreciate you guys as well. So for my guy, Martin Sories of Basketball Society, this is Marcus of the Protect Our Queens podcast signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys enjoy yourselves some women's basketball.